Hello developers, we are back, ready to talk about software development and coding. As a dev, you should be pretty familiar with an IDE, also known as an integrated development environment. If you don't know what that means, simply put, it's where you write your code. Some people would like to use Vim, Sublime Text, or Atom. Personally, I feel like I use the most popular IDE, which is vscode. And if you use vscode, you are probably aware of so many extensions that you can install. Today, I want to talk about the 5 vscode extensions I use to make myself more productive as a software engineer. The first extension I use is called Swim. I partnered up with them on a previous project and I loved using it so much that I'm still using it now on my personal projects. And if you're curious about how Swim works, check out one of the videos above or below, and it'll give you a full workflow of how to create documentation on the fly. At a high level, it's a really useful tool to keep your docs up to date. Let me show you how it works, and I'll also share a new feature that they just built in which makes writing documentation even easier. So let's get to it. First extension we're going to be testing on VS Code is called Swim. In my index.html, you're going to notice some of these squiggly lines. And what these squiggly lines are is an indication that there is documentation referencing to this block of code. And here what we can do is hover over it and read the documentation. When I click on that, it's going to open the documentation on the right-hand side, and it looks like this code was referenced in the hero section. On the left-hand side, you're going to see 4 documents, and these documents are documents that I created personally for my project. And here I have a document related to my About section, Hero section, and Skill section information. Before the most recent update on Swim, to create or even edit a documentation, you had to do it all within the web browser. This was not the worst thing in the world, but it does make it a little bit inconvenient for the developer because they have to context switch from coding to actually writing out documentation. With the most recent update on Swim, you can now create documentation within VS Code. So when I click the create button, I can say project section, and here I'll click save, and right away I have a project section documentation file. And here let's go down to our code in my project section, and I'll say for my introduction, this is documentation related to the project section of the portfolio course. And here let's just give it a little bit of heading. And we'll write down a little bit of information about our snippet of code. So here, I'll just say section title, projects, I enjoy prototyping and building applications. So this is some custom text that I believe that if you're using this template, you should come up with on your own. So here, before displaying your projects, this is a section for you to talk about yourself in relation to your work / side projects. And here I'll type in /code. And now I can just copy this here, add to docs. And here I'll just say, talk about yourself via projects. And let's save it. Cool. Now that we've explained the purpose of this heading section, we go down into the actual projects themselves. Here, I'll write, from this point on, we list out our projects. And then I'll type in code again, and I'll copy up to here and add to docs. And here I'll say, as you build more projects, feel free to copy the format of call LG6 project item filter app. So that is the important thing. And then I'll save that here. So cool, let's save this information. And now when I go back to my terminal, Git should notify me that we created a new markdown file. If I do git status, it's going to show me that I made some changes on my index.html as well as creating a new MD file. So I'm not exactly sure what I changed on my index file, so let's do a git diff. Oh, and it looks like I just shifted my diff just to make sure it was clean. Let's actually not include that in the file. And let's add this new MD file here. And just to be a little bit more thorough about this, let's actually create a new branch called project section documentation. and we will commit this saying create new project documentation. We'll push this. Let's go on GitHub and do a pull request. On GitHub, you're going to see that the project section documentation branch has been pushed. So let's compare and do a pull request. Again, this is just pertaining to all the changes that I made in my documentation. So here, I'll just say create new project documentation. It's going to check for ability to merge and no conflicts or issues. And even Swim is doing a verification. And it says that I need to approve and check. So let's see what this is going on. Oh, apparently you could just click auto sync here. My bad. And now we go back. All checks have passed. And yeah, now we're ready to merge. So a little bit of a hiccup in the beginning, but I think this was more of a user error than an actual issue with Swim. And now we could just merge in the pull request. Let's confirm the merge and delete the branch. And if you prefer the web application, you could always go back into here, and I'll go back into my portfolio course. And now we should have, if I refresh, a project section. So perfect. And now you can write your code and write your documentation at the same time. How powerful is that, right? I really like the fact that writing documentation is just part of your workflow as a developer. And I really think that this is a game changer moving forward. So I highly recommend using Swim extension. Let's move on to the second one. The second extension I want to talk about is called Live Server. And this is great for new developers that are just getting into HTML, CSS, and maybe a little bit of JavaScript, and you want to build a really, really simple web application. The reason why Live Server is so nice is because you can literally run a live server locally on your application without having to do any Webpack configurations or anything like that. On top of that, you'll be able to hot reload your application, whether it's a static or dynamic page. Let me show you how it works in the example. Before Live Server existed, if you wanted to learn HTML and CSS, you would work on your index.html file, and you would do something along the lines of open with and pick a browser. In this case, I am opening it via Chrome. This is fine for software development, but imagine if you make code changes. You say Alex Lee is cool, and you save it. The right side does not update automatically, but instead you have to press Command R or Control R, depending on what OS you're using. So this process can get very, very tedious, obviously, because every time you make a code change, you have to go back to your browser and hit that refresh button. But with Live Server, what you can do is you can get that sweet automatic refresh. So if I do Command-Shift-P and I say open with Live Server, now when I remove Alex Lee is cool and press enter, it's going to give you that automatic update and it'll automatically refresh as well. This is really convenient for new developers that are just starting off learning HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript without adding a lot of complexity to try to spin up your own local server. So highly recommend this and definitely check it out whenever you can. The third extension I want to talk about is called GitLens. If you're in a big team, you're going to have a lot of your engineers touch different parts of the code. Sometimes you're going to ask yourself, what the heck is this line of code? Who wrote it? Why did they write it? It's all confusing to me just looking at it on face value. With GitLens, you're going to be able to see the author of the code, the commit related to the code, and also the pull request for that code change. This is really cool. Let me show you an example. I'm really excited to share this one. The next extension we're going to be testing is GitLens. If we go back to our index.html, you're going to notice a little bit of text on the right-hand side that says KKOMAZ, which is my alias on GitHub, 18 months ago via PR number 1, fix favicon image and hero section. So what these are indicators that shows who is the author, how long ago this commit was made, and what was that commit message. What's really cool about GitLens is that you could even dive deeper into what the details of the pull request was by hovering over the end, and you can see one merge commit for this specific PR. So let's click on this. And if I open this up, I made a pull request for this change. And here you can see the commit message. You can see the files changed. And it looks like I added a few things here, and I also removed a few things here. So I replaced Brandon Johnson with my name, and it says that I am a front-end developer and software engineer. So GitLens is really awesome. I highly recommend you to use it because as you work in a bigger team, so many people are going to touch different parts of the code. And unless you have really, really good documentation, it might be nice to reach out to whoever wrote that code and try to get some understanding of why they wrote a certain line of code the way that they did. So definitely check it out. And let's move on to the next one. The fourth extension I want to talk about is called ES7 plus React, Redux, React Native snippets. And as a power user of React myself, there are a lot of times where you're writing a lot of boilerplate code, but with this extension, you're able to simplify it using snippets. So imagine trying to create a new component and you have to write function, component name, blah, 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 or you're trying to call a use effect or a use state. Instead of writing out the whole thing with your IDE code extension snippets, you could use some shortcuts to generate it. So let me show you that example as well. The next extension we're talking about is ES7 plus React, Redux, React Native snippets. I'm going to share you a project that I'm working on that I plan on sharing soon, but still a work in progress. The whole point of this example is to show you how React code snippet works. If you're like me and you write a lot of React code, then you're probably going to have to write something along the lines of export default function, component name, and then reference to other components. Constantly writing the same code over and over again when trying to create new components can be such a pain and tedious. So it's nice to have these snippets like RFCE. And all I need to do is just add about. What's really cool about this is that I save time from number one, importing React. Also, I save time about writing function. I save time about even exporting that function. And that's why code snippets are so awesome. Generally, if you're going to be writing React code, you're going to be probably using the most common hooks like use state and use effect. So if I type in use state and I reference to this one, it's automatically going to write the state variable as well as the function to set the state. And you could just come up with your own taxonomy for what this state represents. So is clicked, and you could just put this as a Boolean to false. The next thing you could do is also do use effect and reference this one. And now it automatically writes the use effect code for you. Super convenient. There's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning of what snippet equals to what. But once you get the hang of it, it's super convenient and it'll just save you a lot of time when working with React code. So definitely check out ES7 plus React/Redux/React Native snippets. The only thing about this extension that I'm not a big fan of is how long the naming is, but it totally makes sense because it sounds like it supports all three libraries at the moment. The last code extension I really enjoy using is called Turbo Console Log. I've been coding for about 5 to 6 years now, and console log is literally my best friend to figure out why my code isn't working. And sometimes I write too many console logs without me realizing, and once I load my application, I can't remember which console log is associated with what. But with Turbo Console Log, it will write out a meaningful text next to the variable that you're actually trying to output. And this is super convenient because you don't have to come up with a clever scheme to figure out which console log is associated with what. With Turbo Console Log, you can quickly output something meaningful and also show the output. Let's use a real life example and I'll show you in the code snippet. The last extension I want to talk about is called Turbo Console Log. And I really like this one because number one, the logo is awesome looking and it really just makes my console log life a lot easier. So imagine I have this hero component and I want to see what the output of this is open is. I could definitely just do const.log is open. And I could save that and you'll see the Boolean false or true, true or false. But sometimes on the browser, just seeing true or false, what if you have another component that's also console logging the Boolean value false and true? There's just too much noise and it's going to be hard to differentiate. And usually to make that distinction, I actually add something like this, like hero. That's fine and all, but just having to manually do that every single time can get kind of annoying. So what you can do with Turbo Console Log is you could hover over this and I have a hotkey to generate my console log and just do that. And boom, now it tells you right away that this console log is from this specific file on line 11, and it uses the hero function, and we're logging out the isOpen variable. How much more convenient is that than having just isOpen by itself, or even just having an isOpen and you just making up your own standard of what this console log is supposed to be? Check out Turbo Console Log. I highly recommend it. And overall, I hope all of these extensions I've mentioned is useful for you as a software engineer. Ideally, in this channel, it's all about being productive. how to land your first job, and how to really stand out, even if you are new to this. So definitely check out these tools that I personally use because I feel like it will make you much more productive as a software engineer. With that being said, keep building developers. Your time will come. Tech Rally out.